Not that I wouldn't ask any questions.
It's not
We passing money? What are we doing? This is open session. Yeah, no. How much do we need? What do we
I
need?
don't know. Rich said, no.
So why is it coming? It should be going that way, shouldn't it?
I don't know if they're going to Jen.
This is how we get things done. We pass that.
On behalf of the Portsmouth Historical Society, ask for the 7 members to take out an ad, maybe more. But it goes out of their pockets. I think it's $10.
Yes.
But what? It might be 70, it might be $50, but 70 bucks.
All right, we're good. We're back. We're back live. Sorry for the delay this evening. We did have executive session. But before we begin, I need to just go through the safety operations in the event of an emergency. We have 2 doors to your left, another door in the front here. We would exit the building, meet across Middle Road at the school administration building, and await further instruction. And then now if we could all stand for our pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our men and women serving in harm's way. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Do we need to do roll call? Yeah, we guess we do, because we're streaming hybrid. Let's do roll call.
Ms. Ujifuza? Here. Ms. Abbott? Here. Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Katzman?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here. Okay, before we get started, we are streaming tonight as well with our council meeting. So anybody that's participating remotely, if you're attending with Zoom, you can use the hand icon to indicate you have a question. If you're calling in on your cell phone, *9 will indicate you have a question. *6 will allow you to mute and unmute your phone. For those of you participating remotely or in council chambers tonight, when you come to the podium, please state your name and address for our town clerk. And then we will begin. Prior to President's executive summary, prior to tonight's council meeting, we did have an executive session under Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2 negotiations with the fire department. No votes were taken. And we will now begin with our consent agenda items. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. Actually, our first three items, it's a Class F daily liquor license, an entertainment license, and a particular license with a special event fee waiver request. This is for the St. Barnabas Church Annual Festival, the weekend of June 17th to the 19th.
Move to approve all three licenses for St. Barnabas.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And then next we have a peddler license for the mobile food establishment. It's new. It's Cluck Truck LLC. 256 Maple Ave, Newport, one vehicle.
Move to approve the peddler license.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. On mine? Really?
No, it should just be.
It could be. People can hear you too well now.
Boy.
There was a lot of feedback when you were speaking a minute ago. So
Move to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have minutes from our March 7th meeting and our March 14th meeting.
Move to approve as presented.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have our town administrator's report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'd just like to say that after 18 years of working for Portsmouth, our town planner, Gary Crosby, has announced his intent to retire at the end of the fiscal year on June 30th. I would like to thank Gary for his dedicated service to the community. Additionally, our assistant town planner, Mike Asciola, has accepted a city planner position in Dover, New Hampshire. This transition moves him closer to his son and fiance, and I wish him the best of luck as he completes 8 years of service to our town. Both Mike and Gary will be missed. I'm working closely with our HR director to identify qualified candidates to fill those positions. Additionally, our facilities manager, Mr. James Dean, has also announced he will be resigning. Jim will be taking a position down south and establishing a home on property he owns in North Carolina. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with Jim and I wish him well in his new endeavors. We are working closely with the school department and Airmark to identify Jim's relief. With respect to the budget, the finance director and I will finalize the proposed budget this week. I will be out of the office on Friday, so our intent is to distribute your copies and post it electronically to the finance webpage by close of business on Thursday. Unfortunately, the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan workshop scheduled on March 16th had to be rescheduled due to a problem with conflicting Zoom links. The new date is April 13th from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evening. We are soliciting in-person participation, and the workshop will be at the Portsmouth Middle School. We are also working with Horsley Witten to enable remote participation, and we expect to hear this week if we can make that work. There's a few recycling events coming up that I'd like to highlight. A shredding event for Portsmouth residents will be held on May 14th at Clements Market from 9 to noon. A hard plastic collection event for transfer station sticker holders at the Headley Transfer Station will be held at the Headley Transfer Station on June 11th from 8 to noon. And then the next electronic waste collection for anyone will be held July 16th at the high school from 9 to noon. More information can be found on the town webpage. The town is soliciting proposals from qualified consultants to conduct an impact fee needs assessment study and updated fee schedule based on demand for new and additional services on town government, which result from new development. This report is now required every 5 years in accordance with Rhode Island general law. Our goal is to have a draft report presented to the council on June 13th and adoption of the final report by you on June 27th. And then lastly, the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust held its annual Loss Prevention Awards Luncheon on March 16th. Portsmouth was specifically recognized. And I would like to congratulate Paul Rodericks, our Deputy Public Works Director, and Jackie Schultz, our Registrar of Voters, for special recognition they received for their efforts in creating and maintaining a safe work environment for all town employees. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Okay, next, we're moving on to resignations and appointments. First, we have the resignation on the planning board for Seth Paulette.
Move to accept with regret.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And now we have appointments. We have a reappointment for the Conservation Commission for Dave Reese.
Move to reappoint Mr. Reese.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And then we have the Glen Manor House Authority, it's a reappointment of Patty Cofield.
Move to reappoint Ms. Schofield.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business number 1. It's a request acceptance of Windrock Circle as a public road and release of the road bond. Mr. Woodhead?
Council President, members of the council, what you have before you is an advisory opinion for the town council for acceptance of the Windrock Circle and the release of the road bond for a 1-year maintenance. So the planning board and DPW would like to request that you guys approve this.
Just one quick question, Mr. President.
Yeah.
This is just for the circle itself, not to connect the road over to the Ferrera development, right?
Right, that's for our farms.
Move to approve the release of the road bond for Windrock Circle.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And then next item is our monthly finance report. Ms. Lasky?
Honorable Council, as of the end of January, the town is 58% through fiscal year 2022. General fund revenues are at 59% of total budget as compared to 53% in the prior year. And general fund expenditures are at 59% compared to 57% in the prior year. Overall, the increase in revenues is slightly outpacing the increase in expenditures, and we continue to be optimistic that we will end the fiscal year with a nominal surplus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lasky.
Move to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to new business. The first item is an update of the Mount Hope Bridge. And tonight we have the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority, Ms. Silvera.
Laurie Karen Silvera, 1 East Shore Road, Jamestown. Mr. President and members of the council, thank you very much for having us here tonight. I'm here with the Director of Engineering, Eric Seabury, to my left, And behind me on the right is Jeff Goulart, who is the Chief Financial Officer at the Turnpike and Bridge Authority. And I want to start by saying, for once, apparently I had good timing. When I took this position as Executive Director of the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, it was only a few weeks before COVID hit us. So I really, I came into the position and was only, I hadn't even tested out the chair at my desk before I was posting signs about masking up. But when I called Mr. Rayner last week and said, could I get on the calendar for the council? He said, you have great timing. I said, well, that is a first in more than 2 years. So thank you very much for seeing us on short notice, but we would like to have the opportunity to be here. Obviously, you're one of the host communities for our beautiful, majestic, Mount Hope Bridge, 93-year-old suspension bridge, engineering technology from the 20s. And here we are, and we're here because the Mount Hope Bridge needs some work. And I know that we've already contacted the town about this. Last year, we applied for a RAISE grant from the federal government, looking to do a dehumidification system on the Mount Hope Bridge. If a suspension bridge were built today, it would include, as part of the engineering, it would include a dehumidification system, but they actually didn't even become a thing until the 90s, when the first dehumidification system was put in Japan. So, and we only have a few, and we were debating today how many. I know of 2 completed projects in the United States. A third is on the George Washington Bridge. Dehumidification is going on right now. And so we would be for, there are a couple of in the works. So if we got this dehumidification project going, it would be, we would be, 4th, 5th, 6th, we'd be somewhere in there in terms of the bridges in the country that have a dehumidification system. The Pell Bridge, which is much younger than the Mount Hope Bridge, opened in 1969, it also does not have a dehumidification system because, again, the technology wasn't available yet. So, so at some point we'll be addressing this also for the Pell Bridge. So what is of concern to us? What is of concern is the fact that in the main cables we've brought, I call them our scary pictures. We've brought pictures of the wires, the fine wires that are contained within the main cables of the bridge. Those wires, because of the climate, is definitely a result of climate change. The fact that this bridge transports vehicles over and back over a body of salt water has the wires incur corrosion and breakage. In the year 2016, there was an inspection done. We have the results of the inspection. It clearly said, we're seeing breakage. We address it, by the way. We address breakage and corrosion as it's, from time to time. But in order to address it, the cables have to be unwrapped. So, I'm sort of anticipating some of the questions you may have. But, in order to actually see, you may say to me, well, that was done in 2016. Now it's 2022. What does it look like now? And the answer is, we need to get this project underway. And the first step of that project will tell us where we are today. We think we know where we are, and I'll let my Director of Engineering speak to that. But what we do know is that this project needs to get underway. It needs to get going. It is very effective at arresting the corrosion and the breakage. So the sooner we get it going, the better. Of course, that leads us to the big question of the day: money. Where's the money? What does it cost? We estimate that it'll cost about $35 million. We submitted a proposal last year to the federal government for a RAISE grant, looking for $25 million with a match of $10 million, which we would have provided. We came very close. We had a debriefing a few weeks ago with the U.S. Department of Transportation. They reviewed our proposal with us, told us where it was very strong and where it needed to be strengthened. We'll be submitting again in the next couple of weeks. The next deadline is the 14th of April. We think we know where we need to offer the government more reasons why this is the project that they should choose. And so we'll be doing that. But we did want you to know that that this project is, we'll be persistent. We will be very persistent. We will not relent until we find a way. You may be wondering, well, what if you don't get the money from the federal government? For one thing, if we don't get it from the RAISE grant program, there are other programs that we can pursue. So we've left no stone unturned in terms of looking for other sources of funding. We all know the infrastructure, the bridge investment program is part of the infrastructure bill that was just passed. There's a program called Protect. We fit under that program. We fit under several other programs that are making money available to repair bridges like this one. So we will pursue that. If we don't get the money from the federal government, we will proceed. In fact, we are proceeding already. We have put out an RFP. We have responses to it. We will be interviewing firms. We are going to proceed to design this system and go forward. That will make for some very difficult choices that we will have to make about other programs in our capital plan. Money is finite. You can't do everything. So if we have to do a $35 million project, there will be other things that will be taking a back seat. But this is exciting technology. It is effective. And I'm just going to turn it over to my director of engineering just briefly in case if you, Eric, you'd like to address what we're seeing in the pictures there.
Yeah, so first thing I'd want to say is don't let the picture scare you. The bridge is safe. That's an old photo of a previous inspection. All of those cables were repaired. So they use little ferrule attachments. They can reattach them and retension the cables. But speaking to, the analysis that was last done on the cable. So when the bridge was first designed, the cables were designed with a factor of safety of 2.95. That's just what it was in 1929. That was a brand new cable suspension bridge. The last investigation that was done, they calculated it at 2.62. So we have to get these cables stabilized before it gets down to 2.15. Once it hits 2.15 or dips below, then you have to immediately consider restricting loads on the bridge. So the easiest way to say that would be probably just restricting truck traffic as a beginning. The biggest point is you can never gain factor of safety on a cable. You can only arrest it. You can never improve it once you've lost it. So that's why it's important to do this project and stop the corrosion in the cables. If we can get the cables dehumidified down to a point of about 40% humidity, it just about absolutely arrests the corrosion in its tracks. And then you maintain it and you can get 50 to 100 years. It all depends. I mean, because the rest of the bridge is easily fixed. You can repair beams, you can paint beams, you can fix concrete. The cables is where it's at right now. I mean, this is the backbone of the main spans on the bridge. Without the cables, you don't have a bridge. So this is our focus right now, this project.
So if any of the members of the council have any questions, again, thank you for having us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm sure you haven't seen the last of us also. We'll be, if this proceeds, we of course will be coming back to talk to you about it.
So for the prior grant, the town, I know we did submit a letter. So from our perspective, we can help out by providing you a letter, a resolution, something to help
Yes.
support your funding request. And,
Absolutely.
I mean, for us, the bridge, it's one of our lifelines onto the island or off the island. So this is something that obviously would help all the, citizens of Portsmouth and citizens on the island, businesses on the island and everything. So I think we can do that. Or any other comments or questions from counselors?
Mr. President, I just want to say that this council passed a resolution opposing transfer of Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority revenue and management authority to the Rhode Island DOT. We passed that resolution because we like what you guys do and we don't want to see money redirected away from you. So I just want you to know that we do support your work and we thank you for the great job you're doing.
Thank you very much.
We're an island. These are three vital connections to the mainland. This is
There's no question we need the bridges to stay intact.
And in the new proposal, we have delved even deeper into all the connections. That the fact that this is a lifeline, it's a lifeline for medical services. It's a lifeline for food. It's for freight of all kinds. I've been in contact with your public safety department and with Bristol's fire public safety department about the number of ambulance runs you do over the bridge. What medical services, physical, behavioral, are available where? When we had Tropical Storm Henri last summer, we thought we had everything under control, and we knew, for instance, the RIPTA buses. We knew where we knew what we had to worry about in terms of the RIPTA buses coming over the bridges if we had to close the bridges. What we didn't know, and what I found out, I learned something new, which is that there's no dialysis on the island. So they had paratransit vehicles that needed to get over the bridges. So I learned something that day, another critical lifeline. So we're very well aware. And thank you for your comments. We take our responsibility as keepers of these beautiful bridges very, very seriously. And we wouldn't be here showing you these pictures and saying, that we're determined to find the money and to get going on this project. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes.
This bridge also connects us with our fellow citizens of Portsmouth who live on the other islands. The bridge, the buses run from Prunes Island to Portsmouth over this bridge. Our citizens on Prunes Island ferry goes to Bristol and then to Portsmouth. So it is vital to the closeness of our community as well.
That is true. Okay, so I don't think we need any council.
We just need to update the letter of support and
That's it.
resolution. Did we make a resolution? It was just a letter of support. I think it was less than-
It was a letter of support, but
For the application.
Yeah, I will forward a new draft of a template because we're emphasizing more the issue of climate change and how that has caused this situation. So I will send you a new template that will guide you. Of course, it'll be your letter, but at least it will provide some guidance.
it will help us help you.
Yes.
And I would ask that
Thank you.
we forward that letter not only back to the Rhode Island Bridge and Turnpike Authority, but also to our federal delegation to try and
Yes.
Encourage
wiggle
them
some
to
money out
fund.
to help fund this.
Agreed. Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
This is our next item under new business. We'll let you escape. Good night. Next item, new business number 2. It's a resolution in opposition to the Rhode Island 2022 House Bill 6638 and Senate Bill 2340 zoning ordinances prohibits single-family residential zoning in municipalities with populations over 20,000. Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, I asked to have this put on. This is we had some issues a few years back with the ability for the state to creep in and usurp the town's ability to create their own zoning ordinances. This is another one. I would like to see us try to avoid having the state and the federal government tell the towns on what to do. Specifically, I don't want to. We are pretty much all single-family housing, and the last thing we want to be end up doing is losing control of it out of our local zoning. So I think in terms of the resolution that we have in front of us, the only thing that we would have to change is that we haven't hit the 10% low and moderate income housing goals, but everything else to me is about the same. We are at the threshold of 20,000, being at 18,379 or something like that now. So 18,000, sorry, I was going to say 13, 18,000, yeah.
Mr. President.
Yes.
So I support resolution along these lines. I don't know that we need to tell our legislators that they're doing something, quote, absurd. So I might.
I saw that word too. We could take this.
If you're trying to advocate for something, you don't want to make people like it.
I will point out that I looked up all of the sponsors. They all represent a district that covers communities of more than 20,000. If this is what they want for urban districts, then that is what the legislation should address. 20,000 is ridiculous.
Or they could lobby their own zoning and planning boards to make that part of their comprehensive
So,
plan.
right, enabling legislation is always good, but
Right.
prohibitive legislation, you know, there's nothing, we shouldn't be prevented from establishing zoning along the lines of what this legislation would enable. But forcing it on communities that have not asked for it. So
I agree.
I'll also point out I don't think the Senate has taken action on this bill, but the House just late last week voted for it to be held for further study. So it's not going anywhere this year, at least in the House. But it's-
Generally, that's what it means, but what scares me is on occasion that these things pop up at the
It's
last minute.
unheld, yeah.
It's unheld on June 27th and there's the free-for-all, which hasn't happened in the past few years, but It could.
It doesn't hurt to weigh in anyway.
Right, so we,
make our thoughts known.
so we can get this amended? on the
Yes,
town?
by taking out the fourth whereas we'll remove the word of absurd.
Just a threshold of 20,000 population encompasses many non-urban communities.
Other than that?
And these we can just say that the town of Portsmouth has very effective planning and zoning boards.
And take
Take out the
eliminating
rest.
reference to the.
Yeah.
Okay. No, go ahead.
No, Mr. President, I do want to point out that this legislation does push for goals that we have identified ourselves in the comprehensive plan as desirable goals. We want to have lower housing costs, higher density, mixed use, and walkability. And I hate for us to convey the idea that we do not share their goals. So at least insert a sentence that says, while the town of Portsmouth supports goals of housing affordability, that there are unresolved issues that are not addressed by this legislation. So, I mean, I just don't want to seem like we don't support the goals. I know we want to compare this with what we did with the Burrville power plant, but that was a much, clearer case where we didn't like the process and we didn't like the goals. But here, I just want to acknowledge that we do appreciate the goals they're shooting for, just not the process.
But we have that in our own comprehensive plan. So.
Right, but we are specifically opposing this piece of legislation, and I want to acknowledge that Portsmouth doesn't criticize their goals, just the process.
The
that they-
one size fits all approach to prohibiting
Yes.
tie in the hands of communities.
Again,
So-
you can make the argument that we have hit the 10% threshold in Portsmouth, but we can't count the trailer parks that we have as low to moderate income. Unfortunately.
Well, I mean, there's also, if you read the comprehensive plan as it discusses housing, it does talk about how, we have, because of the history of our town, we've not developed, we've developed as very spread apart individual houses where there's not a connection of, I don't know, town center, things like that. And it will take zoning changes at the local level to fix these kind of problems. And I don't know what the future holds. And this isn't the answer, but we do ourselves acknowledge in the comprehensive plan that we would like to shoot for what this legislation is shooting for. So I just want that perhaps acknowledged in the resolution.
If I may, I think that's fair in the sense that if we are signing a resolution, what we are doing is sending a message. So our message, it's fair for our message to reflect that we embrace the ideals of the legislation, but object to
So-
us being prohibited from managing our own zoning.
So then we can, if you want to wordsmith it there, Mr. Jufusa, if you want to put it on the first whereas, the town of Portsmouth has a very effective planning and zoning board and has or is in the process of completing a new comprehensive plan that helps to achieve these goals, something to that
Yes,
effect.
period. That's fine.
Can you wordsmith that for us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, just
Madam
listen to
Clerk.
the recording and what he
Yes.
said.
What he said. No, that's good.
Just put it in after that,
Okay.
okay? But make it in English, not what I just said.
All right. Any further comments?
This
I know.
must be what it was like in Philadelphia in 1776.
Except for one thing, they were sweating in wool and we're freezing today.
We wouldn't mind sweating right now. Okay, Mr. Fitzmaurice, do you?
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I think the key thing I get out of this is we need to communicate to the state that we want to do our own zoning. And I'm a little reluctant to muddy the water about that. Once we take this step and once this becomes legislation, it becomes a precedent. And the state will gradually erode our ability to decide our own future here. Also, I don't know how we're going to convert the current set of R1, basically, properties into multi-home properties without putting a home in my backyard, for instance, in a
It's probably not
street down the
feasible.
side of my edge of my property. So this doesn't look like it's very practical to me. So I don't want this, some, forgive me, person at the state planning division making those kind of decisions for us. We need to be very careful that they understand that. For their respect for the people in the communities that have more than 20,000 population, you know, the Constitution prohibits the state assembly from changing every individual laws in a community, which what they would be doing, because they'd be changing the zoning law, right? Without setting it up for a vote. But they can do that in these communities. They can put it on the ballot for a vote for approval. We don't need to change the whole state to accommodate, you know, 5 or 6 other big communities. They shouldn't expect us to go down this road with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. Is there anything online? No? Okay.
So just to clarify then, if we could change this first whereas to be the town of Portsmouth as a very effective planning and zoning boards who have significantly and wait, and has very effective board and are preparing a comprehensive plan that addresses the issues raised in this legislation. No?
I mean.
It's a word salad that between what you and I
just
just
said.
said that Ms.
I think yours
the-
was
the
better.
Town clerk will figure it
I
in
think
there.
yours is better. I stand down. Apologize. Let's
I-
use Keith's
I,
language.
I can redo it when I listen to
Yeah.
it
Okay,
and
thank
then
you.
bring it back next meeting if that's good for you.
You called my bluff.
That's
There you go.
fine. Why don't we do that?
You wanna just-
That's
Have
fine.
it come back at the next.
That's fine.
Right.
That's the 11th.
Okay. So we have a motion in a second? Or no? We have a motion? I thought we had a motion.
We don't have a motion or a
No.
second,
I
and
think it's continued.
we're just going to table it
Move
until
to
she brings
table.
it back.
Oh, I thought it was, you were just bringing it back.
So move to table to the
All right.
April 11th meeting when the clerk will wordsmith it for us.
Second.
There's our motion, there's our second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jufusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Aye. Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a resolution requesting and supporting legislation to expand the jurisdiction of the Portsmouth Municipal Court. Mr. Rayner?
Yeah, Mr. President, unfortunately, the solicitor is unable to join us. Bottom line is, the council has already voted to ask for this legislation. So this resolution is really for a municipal court bill. And what we're asking for is that the council would adopt this. This would allow us to, we already have a municipal court. This would allow us to address housing violations, building code violations at municipal court level. Whereas right now, they all have to go straight to Superior Court.
Move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Questions, comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly? Did you pull it?
Confused.
He's got blue lights.
Oh, it's good.
Oh,
Blue.
it's-
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have correspondence.
Move to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to future meetings. Next Monday, April 4th is our public hearing for the last, hopefully the last four elements and the updates for the comprehensive plan. Then we have our regular council meeting on April 11th, April 25th. And then we begin budget meetings on April 26th, April 27th, April 28th. And then our regular council meeting on May 9th.
Move to
Motion.
adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you all, and we'll see everyone on Monday night.
Thank you.